Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle from WeAreSC.com. We're down a man. Eric McKinney is at fifth grade graduation. Not his daughter's, but he's doing the family thing. And so we're going to, without the boss here, we can do whatever we want this week. So it could get wild. Probably.
Toga.
Yeah. It probably won't get wild, but it could. All right, guys, let's just jump right in because this was a big recruiting week in the sense that USC landed, I think what everybody agrees is a truly elite prospect that nobody really thought USC had a shot at, even a couple weeks ago. We're talking, of course, about tight end Mark Bowman from Modern Day. Who chose USC over Georgia and Texas. I think Georgia was the favorite for a very long time. Georgia's had some pretty good tight ends recently. But Bowman's coming to play at USC. He shut down his recruiting. And so let's start with Bowman because this is pretty good news. Mark, tell us what you want about Mark Bowman, both as a player and also what you know about his recruitment and how this all came about.
So, I mean, you want to look past the measurables, but I mean, the dude's almost 6'5", 235, 240 pounds. He's described as chiseled, so he doesn't have any baby fat. This young man reclassified. You know, he was supposed to be a member of the 2027 recruiting class. He's now a member of the 2026 recruiting class. And he's already compared to, some of the best tight ends that have played the game. And he hasn't even played a senior season yet at Modern Day. But when you're being compared to guys like Brock Bowers, that's pretty good company. So you watch him play, you watch his film. The dude runs routes like he's a wide receiver. He's got great feet, tremendous hands. He's also physical. You can throw him across the middle. He's not going to avoid contact. And the fact that USC was able to pull him away, they kept chipping away, kept chopping wood, as they like to say it with some other programs. They broke it down and they proved to Mark that, you know what? You don't need to go anywhere else. USC can provide you everything you need. You want exposure? You got it. You want to play against great competition? We play in the Big Ten conference that won the last two national championships. You don't need to go to Georgia. You don't need to go to Texas. And because NIL is a big part of it and we think you're worth it, we're going to make you an offer you can't refuse. So Chad Savage, who was instrumental in this role, made him the #1 priority on his target list. USC all of a sudden now has got that modern day pipeline flowing. You got Mark Bowman. You got Tom Tapui. You got Sean Scott. It doesn't stop. The momentum is there right now. So you're bringing in what's considered one of the top 15 players in the country, regardless of position. And now USC doesn't have to worry about a Tyler Warren type of player playing against them. They've got one of those type of players. They've got a Brock Bowers who you can just unleash, and it's a mismatch. Who's going to cover him? A linebacker? No. Safety? Maybe. But the guy's got speed. He's got great footwork. He runs great routes. He's got great hands. This is why USC has the #1 class in the country right now.
Yeah, that's a really nice addition. Greg, thoughts on Mark Bowman?
Well, there's a lot of guys that get ranked high or in the top 15, and then they move them around up and down. But, he's the best tight end prospect that SC has gone after that I can remember. And I remember the first one that I was really and still am close to in terms of personality and friendship, Mark Boyer, who this is going all the way back to the late 70s. Okay. But this kid is so dynamic that you look at him and you understand when you say regardless of position. A guy regardless of position means he's so dominant that your first thought is, where is he going to be picked in the first round of the NFL? I think what I was impressed with him was his breakaway speed, his ability to change direction. Not only was he smart, he knew how to translate his smartness into his athletic ability. It didn't look like too many people can get him down on the first shot. I'm not saying that won't happen, of course, in college, but at where he is today, there is nothing, nothing. And when we talk about nothing, you usually look at a player that can play like a wide receiver and move like one, but his ability to block on the line of scrimmage is really impressive. In fact, I was rerunning his film to watch him and the intensity and everything else. He's the whole package. The real question will be is how USC will feature him as the whole package. He's the type of guy that you have to, uh, accelerate and show him off, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I agree. His highlight film is impressive. He does all the things you say, and he's running away from defensive backs, and he's playing in the Trinity League. It's not like he's playing in some league where they don't have Division I prospects. He's playing in the best football league in the country, easily the best in the country. And you're right. His ability to change direction, high point the football. You almost get nervous with a guy like this that the hype is too much, that nobody can live up to it. I mean, I'm seeing things from unnamed college coaches saying that this is the best skill position guy to come out of the Trinity League, regardless of position, in the last 4 years or so. Okay, that the Georgia coaches thought that he might be a little more advanced than the Brock Powers. I mean, I don't know if anybody can live up to this kind of hype, but here's what I do know. It's hard to find a tight end that is that kind of mismatch, but when you do, you can build an entire offense around him, right? You saw it with Gronkowski, you see it with Kittle in San Francisco, you see it with Kelsey in Kansas City. If you have a guy who can both make that catch over the middle on 3rd and 7, but can also run past a linebacker who's a mismatch no matter who you put on him, that's a gigantic problem for a defense. It just is. So this is a huge pickup. It shows a couple of things. One is it shows that recruits believe in USC's coaching staff and this recruiting class they're putting together, right? Guys are looking at this and saying, this program is on the verge of returning to the elite. They may or may not be right about that, but that's what a lot of these kids can see. It also shows that USC is now recruiting in the NIL big leagues in a way that they simply weren't a few years ago. 3 years ago, USC doesn't have a shot at this kid, right? No way, no how. He goes somewhere else, probably Georgia, maybe Texas. But he certainly doesn't come to USC. Right now, USC has the money and is spending it so that they can compete with the top programs. And the people that say, well, there's buying recruits. Yeah, but that's how everybody else is doing. How do you think Ohio State won a national title? They're buying recruits too. You think they don't pay money? I mean, what are you talking about? Oregon was the only reason to go to Oregon if they're writing you a giant check. That's how Oregon went undefeated in the regular season. They were writing checks before anybody else was writing big checks. So, of course, USC is buying this recruiting class. But there are lots of other people that would have bought this kid too, right? I mean, if you're, it's not just paying him. You have to be able to show him that you can turn him into a first-round pick, and that he's going to play in big and important games in college, and he apparently believes that. So this is it's a huge pickup. It is a nice cherry on top of a number 1 class. On that subject, guys, it's funny that we're getting close to the end of this class, right? We only have a handful of spots left, probably, despite the fact that we're at the very beginning of June, and none of those big June recruiting weekends have taken place. So let's talk about who's left on the board that USC absolutely has to have. I'm going to take one name off right now because we already talked about him at least the last 2 weeks. Talanoa Ely is a guy USC can't afford to miss on. Linebackers one room where they're not as deep as they need to be. You cannot lose a guy like that. I don't suspect they will. But who else is out there that you look at and say, to the extent there's any such thing as a must get other than Illy, who's out there that you think would really make a difference in this class? What do you guys think?
You go first, Greg.
I think it's going to be evolving still, even if SC looks like they've closed up everything, because there's always going to be, as the season goes on in the fall, and depending how USC does during the season, which may not be as big a factor as it would have been in seasons prior. I think that these guys know each other. We've gone through this a million times. You know, they're supporting the future. You know, people get all excited about this class, which they should. It's a marvelous class at this point, but you have to remember these guys are going into their senior year of high school. They're not going into the freshman year in college. So patience is going to be very important. But I think that at this point in time, could somebody leave this class? I suppose they could, but I don't think anybody who's really local is going to leave it. Could somebody come from outside the western part of the United States? I think it could. You know, everything about recruiting is momentum, and momentum is really important when you're talking about players from far away. So we'll see how that works out. I think it's a win-win situation. I don't really have any real concerns at this point. The fact they got Bowman was uh, what he is worth for the next 7 months, and then when the All-Star games go and television, I mean, he's going to be really, really a well-known prospect for those that may not keep up with this. His PR factor is off the charts in my opinion, and I think just him alone is gonna get people to that maybe didn't commit to USC that might have second thoughts about it. Question will be is will USC have second thoughts about depending on the player, you know, thinking, you know, I guess as long as he's not committed, I don't know, but we'll see. I'm pretty positive about the situation right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about what drives recruiting and momentum, and Mark, maybe you talk about this. It seems to me that USC is trying to sell a vision, and it's not a proven vision yet, right? I mean, when Pete Carroll was recruiting in 2005, 2006, 2007, he had a track record that made it very easy to sell what he was trying to sell. Um, the current coaching staff and Chad Bowden don't necessarily have that, but they're selling something and it's working. What are they selling these kids, and what's the likelihood that that a poor season messes up that sales pitch? Because that's what a lot of fans are trying to bank on around the country, that USC can't possibly keep these guys. They're going to lose some games and it'll all fall apart. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, people have been saying that since the end of April through the month of May. We're now into June, and I think that's what everybody's hoping for is that, all right, well, we know USC's playing the NIL game. They're probably playing a little bit better than everybody else is playing it right now. So we've got to hope that Lincoln Riley is just going to fall on his face 3 years in a row, and that everybody's going to say, see, you committed, you stayed loyal, but why? You're not going to get developed there. I don't know if that's going to be the case because we know how well USC improved on the defensive side of the ball last year. I think you would have to be naive, stupid, ignorant to think USC is going to be worse on that side of the ball this year. If not, they're going to get better. You combine that with the fact that Lincoln Riley is, I think he understands what it takes to win in the big conference now. You got to be a little bit more balanced on offense. You got to control your quarterback. As he said, trim some of the fat, play smarter. So you're going to see more running. You're going to see more tight end usage. That's what, kind of enticed Mark Bowman, I think, as well as the NIL. But, everyone's saying your USC's making everybody, once you're committed, you can't take any more visits. It's working. Whatever their philosophy is, whatever their strategy is, it's working. So I don't know if there's how many more must-have guys are out there. There's still some top names. You want to get, the Brandon Arringtons of the world, the 5-star elite athletes. There's a safety out of Las Vegas, Jet Washington. You want to, keep that type of stuff going as well. You mentioned Talanoa Ely. This class is pretty much close to being filled. If that 35 number is the target, they're at 27 now. Will they get, another 5-star? Maybe down the line. But you want to go after the Luke Wafels, that this is where you start cherry picking. You go get that defensive end edge rusher out of New Jersey. Same place where you grabbed a Brian Cushing. That's what USC's trying to do now. They've locked up California. That was the most important part. And they've done it with a vengeance. So it's hard to kind of point to where USC needs to improve with recruiting, who they need to go get to make this class fulfilled, they've got the #1 class, and it doesn't show. There's no signs of momentum slowing down right now.
Yeah, they need Talanoa Ely, and I think everybody at USC feels really good about his recruitment. Other than that, you could add some really nice pieces. One of the nice things about this year is that USC has not only landed a lot of very good California prospects, but they're landing some of the elite California prospects in a way that they haven't for probably 5-6 years, right? Guys who the very best guys are slipping away, and right now the very best guys aren't slipping away, which is important both because those elite players will make the difference in a game or two, right? I mean, you think of how many times USC had an elite player, Reggie Bush or somebody like that, a Mike Williams, who made the difference in a big game. That tells you the importance of getting elite talent, right? Those guys are going to make the difference between a win or a loss at some point during the season. But it also matters because you're trying to sell a vision, and when these other high school players, especially the 2027 class, if they see USC landing guys like Mark Bowman, what they say is, okay, I get it now. The best guys do see USC as a place to go from Southern California. So that's good. Hey, my second favorite recruiting story of the week. Richard Wesley decommits from Oregon. Now, is that catty? Is it a little bit is it a little bit nasty?
Get it out.
Hey, maybe it is, but I don't care. We made fun of the whole Dan Lanning video ripping off his shirt and cannonballing into the pool when Wesley
So
committed.
USC.
What we didn't know at the time is that Lanning engineered this playtime in the shallow end of the pool with this recruit without his parents knowing that he was going to commit, which is not smart, but that's what happened. And so now Wesley's out, which is funny. It's funny. We can say that. But the other thing that was great about it is that when Bowman commits, USC trolls Oregon with the fantastic video. And if you haven't seen it, go find it. The fantastic Ron Burgundy cannonball video into the pool to celebrate Bowman's commitment, of course, without naming Bowman. But that's clearly what it was. It was celebrating that, and it was mocking Oregon. And whoever came up with that idea needs a big fat raise. That's my position. We need House of Victory needs to throw some money their way. That was fantastic.
I think, Chris, one thing that we should keep in mind is, we always talk about what's the benefit of being in the Big Ten, and we saw, the excitement, and so on and so forth. A lot of the recruits, especially in Southern California, I'm sure it has been mentioned to them, why do you want to play in the league and come back and try to beat your local school here? What is it about, if you're going to play Southern California, do you really want to play, let's say, at Ohio State? I mean, I could understand if you want to play Ohio State or Michigan. I get that. But, it's not easy to sit there and say, you're going to keep coming back here or playing USC for the next 3 to maybe 5 years if you're really a lifer about it. But I think that this idea of I'd rather be at USC beating Ohio State than playing for Ohio State and coming into Southern California and winning. There is just something uncomfortable about that. And I think that the coaches, who I think are doing really a sensational job, in my opinion, I know Lincoln Riley's doing the best that he can. You read about all the times that he's calling these players on a weekly or bi-weekly or more than that. It really gets down to, at some point, all these kids that play in these 7-on-7 leagues and these competitions in the summer, they all get to know each other. I think this is one of those times where they all know each other so well for a number of years that they've kind of clicked in their own world. And the change in recruiting, the coaches have taken them up a level to unify them. So it's really quite a process to watch how this has all come down.
Yeah, they've done a fantastic job of taking these guys and building them into a team, even though they're not yet on campus, right? I mean, this recruiting class seems to be really close. They're constantly around. If Tom Tom doesn't have a locker yet, he should, because he spends as much time there as our current players. And there are a lot of guys that are spending a lot of time there. And so, yeah, look, I hate to tell fans from other schools, will USC have a decommitment or two? Yeah, it might, of course. That always can happen. But is the class going to fall apart? No. And it's not going to fall apart if USC goes 8-4 either. It's just not, because they're not selling these kids on USC is going to win a national championship the year before you arrive. What they're selling them on is, we have an elite coaching staff. I'm going to give you a really big check. And you're going to be surrounded. Your class is full of the best players in America. That's what they're telling them. All of that's true, even if USC loses some games they shouldn't. They can't fall on their face, right? They can't embarrass themselves, but they're not going. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think one of the big factors from my perspective is that we all know what is probably going to be coming in this next recruiting class, but it's the one following that really has my attention, because they'll need two classes to really solidify the foundation and get where they want to go. And I think reaching back to Bowman, for an example, these kids in the class of 2027, they know who he is. They know, they see it. And that's the momentum from this class reaching the 2027 class. The 2027 class is going to be the one, if you're really into following all this, you really have to pay attention to commitments and what's happening. And I'm not expecting 1,000 commitments in class of 2027, but I'm willing to bet there are some already that said, I'm coming, that probably are coming. It's not going to be announced at this time for obvious reasons. So I think the class of 2027 to me is what has my attention, assuming that all those in the 2026 actually do sign in December.
Yeah. Mark?
No, I was just going to say, there's also the undercurrent, these guys, the guys who are in the 2026 class right now, they've taken on the attitude of it's us versus the world type of thing. It's California versus everybody else. They're tired of being told you guys are soft. You got to come be developed at Ohio State or Georgia or Clemson or Texas. USC is going to prove that, you know what, we used to do it with California kids in the past. Wasn't that long ago. Well, we can do it again. So that's the attitude they're taking.
It was too long ago, but it wasn't that long ago. We all remember it.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, good news. We've got we're going to have recruiting news pretty consistently, I suspect, because now we have these huge June recruiting weekends coming up. And so, in fact, I think unless he's changed, I think Talanoa Ely is going to be on campus this coming weekend. So we're going to have stuff to talk about. Okay, let's pivot a little bit. We've been talking a little bit about the college football playoff because there's always talk about how it's changed. It's clearly going to expand. We all know that. And the question is, what will it look like? For quite some time, the SEC and the Big Ten have been pushing for at least 4 automatic bids from those conferences. And I thought they would get what they wanted, because if those two conferences push hard enough, I don't know who can stand in their way. They control most of college football at this point. But now the SEC has backed off of that position and seems to be supporting the 5+11, the 5 conference champions plus 11 at-large bids. If the SEC is backed off, and it sounds like they have, by the way, because the SEC thinks they can get more than 4 teams in under this other approach, then I suspect the momentum for that is going to disappear, because the ACC and the Big 12 already hated it. So let's talk about this 5+11 format and what we think of this. Does this make more sense than having multiple automatic bids? Is it a problem? Most importantly, is it good for USC? Mark, you seem to have an opinion. Go ahead, launch into it.
Yeah, now this is the SEC's way of saying, you know what, you see what we did with our softball teams? You see what we did with our basketball teams? You see how ESPN is our propaganda machine? We're going to play that. We want to play that game with football. This is just going to induce more crappy out-of-conference scheduling. This would be a reason why USC wouldn't want to extend the contract, the rivalry game with Notre Dame, because they're going to see how the SEC wants to continue to game the system. The fact that you think you need to have more than 4 representatives from your conference in a 12-team playoff field, look, there's confidence and there's arrogance. The SEC is just walking around like right now, like their stuff doesn't stink. We know it does. Look, the Big Ten's won the last 2 national championships. Everybody else has kind of put their foot down right now. They have to say, look, we've got to stop letting the SEC run things.
I mean, but they won't, because the Big 12 and the ACC didn't like it to start with.
You know what? If that's the case, if that's the direction it's going to go, I think we're probably one step closer to everybody just saying, screw the NCAA. Let's just break away and go form our own mini professional league, whatever you want to do it. You cannot have a 5+11. It doesn't work. You're inducing too much Mercers of the world playing Alabama, too many of the Citadels playing Georgia, that type of stuff.
Yeah, I think it is going to happen. I don't like it, but I think it is going to happen. And what you're going to have is you're going to have the best playoffs in sport. I think the NFL playoffs are amazing, but you're going to have the best playoff in sport, but at the expense of the regular season. College football used to have the best regular season, hands down, because every game mattered. I don't know that for the elite teams, every game matters at this point. If 16 teams get in, how many years is it that Ohio State and Alabama aren't going to be in the top 16, right? So does a Michigan game still matter to Ohio State? Yes. Does it matter to Ohio State like it would have 10 or 20 years ago? Probably not, because you can lose that game and still get in and win it all, as Ohio State showed this past year. This is also the death knell for USC Notre Dame. I know that USC was waiting around to see what was going to happen, because with automatic bids, you can play non-conference and it doesn't really matter. Now that extra loss matters, and I can virtually guarantee that USC is going to pull the plug on that. I don't want to argue it again. Trojan fans that are on the wrong side of this, I love you, but you're wrong, and it's embarrassing. I still love you. But USC Notre Dame shouldn't disappear just so USC can get to 9-3 instead of 8-4 and be the 16th seed. That's stupid.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. You can say I love you, but use your side eye. You look at them with your side eye when you say it, because you don't really.
I mean, yeah, I get. Look, I mean, people can reasonably disagree on things. I don't know if we can on that, but we can reasonably disagree. Here's the thing, though. When you look at what this means, that means that you're going to have the committee that's deciding 11 of the 16 spots, right? I don't know how a USC fan can trust that committee. I just don't know. How can we trust the people to pick the representatives after 2003? After where LSU and Oklahoma get in the national title game, USC goes to the Rose Bowl and beats up on Michigan. LSU and Oklahoma weren't nearly as good as USC. Oklahoma really wasn't as good as USC that year. It was ridiculous. 2008, 2008, one bad half on the road in Corvallis to a pretty good Oregon State team that finished ranked. And that means that you're going to leave a team with the best defense in the country and a future starting NFL quarterback on the sideline. So once again, you can throw Oklahoma in there. I mean, look, I don't trust that committee to do anything right. I don't trust them to be fair to West Coast teams. I don't trust them to do anything other than look at the final loss column. And if they have to have a tiebreaker, they'll pick the SEC team. That's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do. That's not a system I'm excited about. But I think that's where we are. Greg Katz, weigh in on this.
Well, out in our area of the country, we have a high school governing body called the CIF, the California Interscholastic Federation. And for a long time, the conference champions would be in the playoffs, right? And then you can get a second team in or a third team in. And then I think it was at the time you had to win like 4 games to win the CIF for the championship. Now we've evolved into a state championship, that type of thing. But I don't know. I think that teams that win the championship in their league should get automatic berths. I don't have a problem with that. And I don't have a problem if the SEC can get 3 teams in, or the ACC gets 3 teams in. because at some point, like the Trinity League is, arguably, one of the best, if not the best high school team in the, program in the country as far as leagues goes. They're going to have, somebody's going to get eliminated just by, you can't say, okay, well, we're the SEC, we deserve 5 teams, 16. I don't think you can have a real playoff that way. My feeling would be, honestly, is have all the teams that win their conference, of the recognizable ones, they get in, then pick the two, or take no more than 2 more from each conference if you want, obviously the at large, and kind of go with that. This idea to me, we deserve 4 teams, 5 teams. To me, it dilutes it. I look at basketball as an example. I mean, some of these schools, like when the Big Ten gets, 7 schools in or 8 schools, I just go, come on, you know what? That's watering it down. I think that TV doesn't want it watered down, but they want to get good ratings. They want all the good teams in there. And you know what? If you had a 16-team playoff, you'd be getting most of the good teams. And then they play each other. I don't like buys for playoffs. I think that's, I think a team wins the league. Okay, you won the league. You don't deserve a buy. You deserve to get seeding wise 1 versus 16. That's fine with me.
Frankly, 16 is too watered down for football, right? The number 16 seed is never going to win this thing. It's not as bad. It's not as watered down as a 64 team. I guess it's not even 64 now, right? Because you have those play-in games too. It's
Well, they're going to
60
expand the playoffs. They're
Actually,
going to
kind of
expand it.
8 to 72.
I mean, that's I understand, and the NCAA basketball tournament is great. It's great. You have a lot of early mismatches, but every once in a while you'll have an upset, and that's fun. You'll get a 14 seed beat a 3, right? That happens sometimes in the tournament. Number 16 is not going to beat number 1 in college football. They're just not. They're not going to. It's going to be extraordinarily rare. And if you look at the divisions that have 16-team playoffs, the same teams are winning all the time. The same teams that would be in there if you had an 18 playoff. So I think 16 is too many. I think it waters down the regular season too much. And do I think that it's unfair to have 4 automatic bids? Maybe. I'm torn on that, but I'll say this. If you're going to stack the Big Ten and the SEC with most of football's traditional powers, and you want the playoff decided by on-field play, at least you have to finish in the top 4 instead of being SMU and not really playing anybody in the ACC and getting in with 2 losses, even though you're not nearly as good as the other teams in that playoff. So I don't know. I just think the problem is you have too many teams, but that's where we are, and it'll be fun to watch them. It's just we lose something from the regular season, but I'm talking like an old man now, an old man who liked, the Rose Bowl and regular season games and the like.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of those teams in the SEC, they're actually starting to level up their out-of-conference schedules. Same thing with Notre Dame. We talked about this, on last week's show, I believe. So do those contracts stay in existence? Because it's going to be weird. If you're going to play those games, then there's no reason for USC not to play Notre Dame. But I need to see it, and I'll feel more comfortable with the 4 auto bids if they can make that.
Well, if it's a top 16, if you're 9-3 in the SEC or the Big Ten, especially if you're 9-3 and you have a name like Alabama or Michigan or USC, you're always going to get in. Really, you have to go 9-3 in the regular season. Is it easier to go 9-3 if you replace Notre Dame with Missouri State? Yeah, probably is. Nobody wants to watch that game, but it probably is. I just can't figure out for the life of me why we give up maybe our best tradition in order to be able to sneak in as the 15 seed 9-3 and not even be a very good team. What's the point of that? I just don't get it. But whatever. I'm going back. I promised you I wasn't going to fight with you anymore, Trojans. You disagree with me on this, you're wrong, but I love you. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, let's do this. I want to look at one position for this upcoming 2025 team. Last year, we saw huge improvement defensively, right? I mean, 1, the scheme was better. 2, it was a much more disciplined defense. Very seldom did you just have the magnificent breakdowns that with Alex Gridge you would have like once every 4 plays. That just wasn't happening. What we didn't have is a pass rush to speak of, right? It was a team that could not get to the passer. USC added a bunch of size inside this year, and they have guys returning like Abasiri, who was a true freshman last year, who is now going to be physically ready to step in. They're going to be big inside. They're even going to have some size outside because Jakeem Stewart can be outside at 290 something. Anthony Lucas can be outside. So they're going to be big. My question is whether they're going to have a pass rush off the edge. So let's talk about that. Who do we think is going to be able to do what USC has to be able to do, which is terrorize a quarterback off the edge, right? Every great defense has somebody who can do that. All the great USC defenses have had somebody who can do that. Who does it this year? Mark, what do you think?
You got plenty of players to choose from. I mean, the name that the coaches kept talking about at the end of spring camp was Devin Tompkins. He's a guy who can play inside, but you can also line him up outside. But you got Cameron Fountain, you got Braylon Shelby, you got Anthony Lucas. I mean, if you can't get 10 sacks or more out of those 4, there's a problem. USC has the talent; they have the depth. So I mean, those are the names. If you're not going to get it from there, where are you going to get it from? Are you going to get it from?
I got one other name for you. Elijah Newby.
Elijah Newby, but we need to see him play at that rate, at that level.
I don't know what we're going to get from him. Here's what I know. He's long and unbelievably fast. This kid ran a 10.600 meter in high school. I mean, this is and his first step is unbelievably fast. He's an unbelievable athlete. Is he a pass rusher? I don't know yet. I know that if you're going to pick an edge rusher, not a big guy like Anthony Lucas who can make plays off the edge, but the Micah Parsons of the world, right? Who's 240, 245 or so, and is just super fast off the edge. That if you're looking for a guy like that, Newby certainly has the measurables. Greg, let's talk about a couple of guys that we have coming back. We have Cameron Fountain that Mark mentioned. We have Braylon Shelby. It looks at this point like Fountain has jumped over Shelby, probably rightly based on the way they both played last year. What do you expect to see from those two guys? These were both big-time recruits that have some talent. Somebody needs to get to the passer. Can we expect those guys to do it?
Well, I think Fountain can do it. I like Fountain. I think he's good. And you know what? It's kind of amazing to me how we all focus in. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's amazing. We focus in on this quote edge. Okay, the guy on the edge. Well, they have a lot of athletes, but which one can be effective coming off the edge? I think some of it will depend on the type of bull rush, twists, whatever you want to call it, from the inside, to force a quarterback to try to go outside. Then players like you mentioned that have the speed can really come into play. I think that Fountain, we're so concentrated on this recruiting class, we tend to almost forget who the good players are that are coming back that probably are going to make a big difference when they come back. I think that Fountain is certainly one of them. But you're going to need more than one of them, because if Fountain goes down, like I look at Lucas and everybody's going, well, Lucas is this and Lucas is, I said, Lucas hasn't even played hardly, in my opinion. And if he plays, are you rooting for him with your heart or with your head? Do you see the production in it? And I don't mean, when I say production, I don't mean like 1 out of 7 plays, something like that. These guys have got to show that they can handle it inside, especially in the Big Ten, where they're going to match up with physical athletes, and that's what's important to me.
Yeah, I think what we saw from I think Anthony Lucas was maybe the most improved player on the defense for the first half of the season when he was playing. He wasn't, he wasn't rushing the passer like Bruce Smith, but he was playing very physically and giving a solid contain on the edge in the run game, which is something that we hadn't seen much of. I think Anthony Lucas is going to be able to do that, right? Anthony Lucas is going to be really helpful in the run game if he stays healthy. I don't know if he can come off the edge and rush the passer. I just don't know. Braylon Shelby, I think to this point has been something of a disappointment in that category, although, he's starting his third year, and some guys, that's when they make their jump. I think everybody expects Cameron Fountain is going to be a problem for opposing offenses. He was starting to turn it up as a true freshman, and you usually see a big jump from that true freshman year to the sophomore year. A lot of guys improve a lot. So I don't know who's going to do it. I know this. I think USC is going to be a much more difficult team to run the ball against than they were last year, and certainly than they were the years before that. What I don't know if we have a handle on yet is just how good they're going to be rushing the passer, and that matters. So that's the one spot I'm interested in seeing what we can develop, and I am interested in seeing what Elijah Newby can do. The fact that they moved Newby to edge when there's a little bit light in the linebacker room tells me that they think he can make a difference there. Because otherwise, there's no reason to stick him over there and have him buried on the depth chart. But we'll see. It'll be interesting.
They also could have moved him up, they also could have moved him up there during the spring, one, because they wanted to see what they can get out of it. Two, they needed numbers. Anthony Lucas missed part of spring, so
Yeah.
it might have been some of that might have played a role as well. I hate to be the blanket, but facts are facts.
Hey, you can be the wet blanket sometimes, Mark. Usually Greg and I do that, and it's okay if you want to do it sometimes. Okay, let's close with a couple of topics having to do with the College Football Hall of Fame. 3 USC players are on this year's College Football Hall of Fame ballot. Jeff Bregel, very good offensive line. I say very good. Of course, these guys are good. They wouldn't be on the ballot otherwise. Jeff Bregel from the 1980s. Mark Carrier from the 1980s. Of course, Taylor Mays, safety under Pete Carroll not too long ago, although I guess it's a long time now. Thoughts on these guys? You think any of these guys get in? Number one. Number two, should any of these guys get in? And if we say no, it doesn't mean we don't think they're great players. These guys were great players, but getting in the Hall of Fame is, you can be really good and not get in the Hall of Fame. So what do you think? Who's getting in and who should get in? Greg?
Well, I think that Mark Carrier should get in. I think Mark is kind of a victim of when he came through at USC. They had so many good players in the secondary, especially at safety and everything. But at some point you go, well, if you can let this guy in, why can you not let Carrier in? And my feeling is I don't like the numbers game per se. I don't like the regional bias, but the reality is how many of these, I mean, honestly speaking, how many of these writers in the media, including us, see that much of other players or spend all day in front of the TV set? I mean, I could probably do it. I'm sure Mark can do it. I'm sure you can do it, Chris. And Eric probably could do it. But you know what? It's unless you really see these players and you compare them to other players within your own program that have maybe gone to the Hall of Fame. I mean, think about this. I mean, this, you could say this has nothing to do with it, but many, 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 many years ago, SC had a tremendous tackle in Marvin Powell. And Marvin Powell was a 3-time All-American. If you're a 3-time All-American and you are not in the College Football Hall of Fame, I want to know, what All-America teams did you get? There are All-America teams now that I don't even know who the heck they are, or who's sponsoring them. But I know in the old days, this idea that Marvin Powell is not in the USC Hall of Fame is, I don't know what he did. I mean, he must have done something to upset people that voted in, because, if you're going to sit there and say players of that caliber deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, I mean, Bregel was a great player too. But I don't think he's going to get in. This is my opinion. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it, but I think the more likely one is probably Mark Carrier. Taylor Mays came along when there was a lot of good players, really good players that played for Pete Carroll. The question is did Taylor Mays in his career, was he as effective as, let's say, Mark Carrier is? Well, if you say he is, then he should be in the Hall of Fame. But if I was going to rank him, and which I do vote on it, by the way, I would say my order would be, at least at this point in time, would be Carrier as my number one pick, uh, because I think he's the most deserving of it at this point. And I don't like the idea that we keep bringing these guys back, because the more you bring them back, then they say, well, this is his third appearance on the ballot or his fourth appearance. It's almost like negative to me. Either he's good enough to be in, or he's not good enough to be in, period.
Yeah. Mark, thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think Mark Carrier is probably the favorite of that trio to get elected, just based on everything he did at it during his career at USC as well as in the NFL. Jeff Riegel, probably deserving, but he played center. He played during those mid '80s where USC was, they had talent, but they were kind of mediocre. They did win a Rose Bowl, but they weren't consistent. And then as far as Taylor Mays, excuse me, he kind of changed the way you played the game at that position. It was like having a linebacker back there, just playing safety, just cracking skulls. Everybody is always, at least I do. The first thing that my mind conjures up when I think of Taylor Mays is that play in the Rose Bowl against Penn State. He took out two players. He took out the Penn State wide receiver, but he also took out his teammate because the hit was so violent. He was taking out running backs on consecutive plays against Arizona. It was the way he played the game. And it was I don't know if he could play that way today. He would get
he could play it for about 3 plays until he got thrown out. But no,
he was intimidating.
He was, yeah, no question. Look, all 3 of these guys were great players. Taylor Mays was an intimidating. He was an old school safety back in the times when the job of the safety was to just destroy people who come across the middle, so they don't want to anymore, right? And that was the way football was played up until 10 years ago or so.
Not at that. Not at the size that Taylor Mays brought. 6'5", 200 and something pounds, runs a 10,700 meters.
No, fair. Taylor Mays was bigger and faster than most of the safeties that played that way. But his style of play, he wasn't as good as Ronnie Lott. I'm not suggesting that, but his style of play is what you would expect from a Ronnie Lott, or to take a much smaller safety, Chuck Cecil, right? I mean, Chuck Cecil was about my size. Chuck Cecil's only job in life was to try to decapitate people, and he would do it often enough that there was an intimidation factor. That's largely been taken out of the game. Mark Carrier could hit too, but Mark Carrier was also a fantastic cover guy at free safety. Had some enormous interceptions. Led the NFL in interceptions as a rookie. I'm stunned, frankly, that he's not in there now, and the fact that it's taken this long means that he may not get in still. But that would be a no-brainer from my perspective. There was other Hall of Fame news. We'll close with this, and this isn't all that USC relevant, but they changed the rules for the College Football Hall of Fame when it comes to coaches. The old rule was you had to coach at least 10 years and win 60% of your games. And I think they lowered it to 0.595 because Mike Leach's winning percentage was 0.596. Let's talk about that just for a second. What do we make of that? They're changing the rules to get Mike Leach in. Should Mike Leach be in the Hall of Fame? I mean, is this a College Football Hall of Fame head coach? Greg, what do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah, the Pirate. Is the Pirate a guy that they should be making special rules in order to get him into the Hall of Fame? Is he that level of coach?
Well, did he change the game in any form? I guess you could say he did,
No.
to an extent that, there's a lot of his disciples that are running his stuff. I think when you look at the schools that he led, it wasn't Michigan, it wasn't Ohio State, it wasn't Notre Dame, it wasn't Alabama. So that kind of detracts a little bit from him. I don't know. I think sometimes with these awards, I mean, what has a Bill Belichick at North Carolina wins 3 straight conference championships, and then in his 4th year decides I'm going back to the NFL? Whatever. Are we going to sit there and say, no, he didn't coach long enough? The question is was he good
They
enough?
will say that. They will say that because the only reason Pete Carroll's not in, because his qualifications put him in easily. I'll tell you some of
Absolutely.
the guys who are in, is because he coached 9 years instead of 10. So they haven't made an exception for Pete, but they have made one for Mike Leach. Mark, thoughts?
So I think Mike Leach probably crosses that 600 winning percentage bar if if he survived and was able to coach another year. So I see why they're bending the rule. Mike Leach is one of the characters of the game. Greg talked about it. He did change the way the game is played. The type of offense was being incorporated into across the country now. I mean, you talk about the Mike Leach coaching tree. Lincoln Riley falls off of it. He had a little bit of John McKay in him as well with those witty, odd, strange quips that he would come up with. So yeah, you want the Mike Leaches of the world to be able to make the Hall of Fame, even if it's after the fact. So if he was still alive, he'd probably win 60% of his games. He qualifies. Yeah, I think you make the exception for him. But at the same time, though, hey, Pete Carroll deserves to be in there.
Yeah, I mean, this is my issue. Look, Mike Leach belongs there. Now, I want to read just some of the guys that are in. Mike Leach belongs in more than they do because he was an innovator. He and Hal Mummy completely changed the way football is played. Not necessarily to my liking, but they did. They were innovators that changed the way the game is played. Found a way for small schools to be able to compete with bigger schools with better athletes. And he was a larger than life character. And that matters too, right? I mean, to be somebody that is eminently quotable and is unusual, that makes sense to me that you would put somebody like him in. My problem is not changing the rules for Leach. My problem is the idea that you have this threshold of 60% in 10 years anyway. Are we worried that somebody who's only coached for 3 years is going to get put in the Hall of Fame? Why? If somebody coaches 3 years and they're in the Hall of Fame, they must have had an extraordinary impact on the game, right? Whereas you look at some, I went to the internet to figure out, okay, well, I think he belongs there. Let's look at some of the guys that are in. Mike Bellotti, Mark D'Antonio, Pat Dye, Paul Johnson, Dick McPherson, Don Nealon, Gary Pinkel. Gary Pinkel? Look, here's the thing. It's not that those guys weren't good coaches and they didn't have successful careers. I'm just saying, Gary Pinkel, go look at some of the coaches around Gary Pinkel's name on the list, right? You've got the Urban Meyers, you've got Ara Parsegan, you've got these guys that no brainer. Gary Pinkel? I mean, Mike Bellotti. It turns out Mark Antonio was a really good football coach. He was. Who never really won anything. He was at a school that doesn't win much, and he didn't win much, but he was over 60%. He was there forever, so they throw him in. I look at it and say the problem is not that they made an exception and get Mike Leach in. The problem is they're letting a bunch of guys in that have no business being in. And Pete Carroll's on the sideline, despite the fact that his impact was twice what Paul Johnson or Dick McPherson's was because he coached 9 years instead of 10. How stupid is that?
Well, it's a good old boy network. I mean, let's face it, we see that in all walks of life. People that get awards, and you go. I know that in education they like to have the Teacher of the Year award at the elementary schools, the high schools, and maybe the college. And one of the things I always said was, how do you vote for someone to be Teacher of the Year when you're not in their classroom? Most of the times, Teachers of the Year are who worked extracurricular activities and that sort of stuff. But the actual, I'm in the classroom, you're not in there watching me teach. You don't know who my students are. Okay. I will say this about like college football or even basketball at some point. Look, you're recruiting these players. So if you say, well, we couldn't get the good players, okay, I can buy into that. But what did you do with the players that you did recruit? And why did you recruit them? Some coaches are always going to come in third place, and people go, boy, he's really a good coach. And you go, well, if he's really a good coach, why don't they put him in an all-star, situation? Why is he not coaching, an all-star game or that sort of stuff? So, it becomes a kind of a personality thing, which I really dislike. Like Pete Carroll, come on. Is there anybody who says that he shouldn't be in the College Football Hall of Fame? No. You know, and the same thing like with, let's say, Claiborne at SC, a linebacker. Look at these guys have proven it, you know, and I think you made a good point, Chris. When you look at the people that are in there, okay, even let's say Baseball Hall of Fame, and you see some of the characters like Ty Cobb, and you know, and then you look at Pete Rose. Now, I mean, you can argue about Pete Rose all you want, but you know, I mean, as a player, he doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Should he have bet on his team? No. You know, did he pay a price? Yes, dramatic. And even when he gets in, he's not alive to see it. You know, and it's like SC. When Reggie Bush was taken to the cleaners with SC, how many people stood up and said, "Well, maybe we should look at this a little bit more and see who's on the committees?" And they don't do that. They have already a preconceived notion of what somebody should be in the Hall of Fame or they shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, and I think that's unfair.
Yeah. Yeah, completely different subject, but Bonds and Clemens should be in. Just vote them in. I know they're bad guys. I don't care. Okay, guys. Any last thoughts before we sign off? We got some big recruiting news coming up. I think we have that $1 special still. Usually Eric's here to do the business stuff. I don't do it, but the dollar doesn't go to me. But I do think you get first week for $1. I think
Yep.
that's what it is.
Yep.
This is a good time to be on the board. There's going to be a lot of recruiting news, so this is a good time to sign up. Anything else?
No, I think you covered it, Chris. Recruiting. This is recruiting season. If you're the tax man, you're busy right now. So that's why Scott isn't with us, right? Right.
Yeah.
I think the thing about these recruiting visits, although so many of them are already committed, shall we say, it's more of, I wouldn't know if I would call it a recruiting thing myself. It's a reinforcement of making sure that everybody's on the same page and the players are getting to know each other a little bit deeper than they've known each other. And it's really a point where the player goes, yeah, I went and it was just as good as when I've been there on unofficials or whatever. And my mind is made up. The real
Hey,
question at the
recruiting.
end here, and I'll stop with this, is whether they would be willing to move the early signing period to be, I don't know, the end of August for players that really know, and with exceptions in case coach gets fired or something happens. Because if players are going to start committing, I know that it's still early. Uh, you know, I won't give my viewpoint on this, but the bottom line is you know, we're getting to the point where so much emphasis is being placed. Like right now, the kid hasn't even played his senior year in high school. Does it matter? No. You know, so it's interesting. I'll just say that it's interesting. It's all interesting.
Yeah, I mean, having an early signing day that's right there in the middle of bowl season, and I mean that never made any sense. Having one before senior year, I can see why that might make sense. I can see why coaches might be hesitant to take a kid that early. But every year there are kids that you would take, right? I mean, USC's taking Mark Bowman almost no matter what happens, unless he gets abducted by aliens, they're taking him. And whether he has a slightly disappointing senior season or not. And Greg's right. A lot of these guys on these visits have already committed, but recruiting never ends. In fact, USC in June is recruiting all of their current players every week also, because in this day of free agency, recruiting is always going on. So recruiting is always going on, but inside the Trojans Huddle is not, because we're now finished until next week. Thank you for joining us, and until next week, fight on, everybody.